So in lesson 2, we're now going to start looking at how do we add things to an array, and we're also going to look at the difference between arrays and what are called lists. Sorry about that. So by the end of this lesson, the first thing that I need to add in here is that you should be able to explain the difference between an array and a list. So that's really what we're going to do in this particular video. And then in the second video, you're going to use what's called append to enter values into an array. And then you're going to be able to take user input and add in values to an array throughout a program. So you don't have to have that array completely defined right at the beginning. So to begin, I want to look at the difference between arrays and lists because Python uses both arrays and lists, and they're very, very similar. They both are basically lists of items. That's really where they are similar, is that they are both lists of items. They both store values in exactly the same way using those square brackets, separating the items inside those brackets by commas, and then you set them equal to the name of your array or your list. The big difference between the two is that an array is a list of similar items. So for example, here, this is a list of all integers or a list of all numerical values. An array is basically a very specific type of list where they only contain the same type of variable inside of it. Whereas a list is a list of all types of items. So notice here that this list has the number 5, and then the name Sally, and the number 7, and then the name Bill. That mixture of strings and numbers makes this a list. That's the key difference between the two. And I want to explain why we're going to focus on using arrays throughout our class. So we're going to do an example of a list code in our program here. So what I'd like you to do is start a new program. So do File, Save As. We'll go into our Computer Science Projects, Unit 7. We're going to do Unit 7, Lesson 2. And this is going to be arrays versus lists and appending an array because we're going to do both in here. So here to start off, we have Unit 7, Lesson 2. This first part is going to be about lists versus arrays, how they are different and why we're going to focus on using arrays. So here we're just going to type the code in on the screen. We have definition main. In here, we are designing a list. So we have list equals, and then we have inside of here a number of items. We have Jim and the number 12. And then we have the string Jane, capital letter, and then the number 27. Then we'll have the word Mary, and then we'll have the number 5.6. So we know this is a list because it contains both strings and numbers. That's why we know that it is a list. So from here, what we're going to do next is we're now going to print out each item in this list. So do for J in list. Then we're just going to print J to the screen. So remember, this will cycle through each item in the list. And then from here, the second line here will print each individual item in the list as it cycles through. And then we just need that function to run the program. So runs the program at the very end, we just need main. So if I run this program as is, what you're going to see is that it works just like an array. So most of the time, lists and arrays, the difference between the two, if you're just printing it out or something like that, it's not that important to use an array versus a list. But there are times where arrays really are more useful and where lists will actually throw an error. So what we're going to do next is we're going to add in just this single line right here. So we're going to add in J equals J plus 5. What this is going to do is it's going to add 5 to each item as it cycles through the list. You can see here we're going to go through each item in the list. We're going to add 5 to it, and then we're going to print it to the screen. And if we run it, what happens is it throws an error. So here you can see that it has an error and it says type errors must be a string, not an integer. So what it's getting mad at is when it goes through the first time for Jim, it's looking at it and it's trying to figure out how to add the number 5 to Jim, and it can't. Here the big thing is that we have a string as for Jim, and this is an integer, and you can't combine strings and integers. And this is really why we use arrays versus lists, because that mixed list of numbers or strings involved in it, we can't do anything with it besides really print it to the screen. So it's for this reason, like we could add 5 to 12 or 5 to 27 or 5.6, but it's because we can't add 5 or we can't manipulate strings and numbers the same that we're going to focus on just using an array. So we're going to focus on just using items that have the exact same type of variable inside of them. So everything we use from now on will be an array. You shouldn't have a mixture of strings and numbers in there. All right, so that's the end of this video.